On January 17, 1961, Patrice Emery Lumumba, the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, was assassinated. Consequently, many of his supporters fled the country's capital of Leopoldville and sought refuge in the city of Stanleyville, where Lumumba had significant recognition. One of them was his former Deputy Prime Minister, Antoine Gizenga. Upon arrival, Gizenga and fellow Lumumbists consolidated power and organized a new government in Stanleyville called the Free Republic of the Congo. This new government garnered support from China and the Soviet Union. At the time, the Congo was plunged into crisis after its army mutinied and two of its prominent regions seceded. However, by early 1963, the rebellion was suppressed with the assistance of foreign intervention, notably from the United Nations. Gizenga was subsequently arrested and his government dissolved, prompting many of his supporters to seek exile in neighboring Congo-Brazzaville. In Brazzaville, this group began to take practical measures to initiate an armed struggle and regain control of the Congo. Led by prominent Lumumbists Christophe Benye, Gaston Sumalo, and Bochari Davidson, they established a revolutionary organization called the National Liberation Council, CNL. After prolonged instability and a corrupt and inefficient government, the CNL began advocating for a second independence to overthrow the neo-colonial regime in the Congo. Without delay, the organization initiated plans for a revolt in the country's eastern parts, targeting specifically the Kivu and the Oriental provinces, as well as parts of North Katanga, which were previously under Gizenga's control. Assigned to carry out the rebellion in northern Katanga was a man by the name of Laurent Desire Kabila. In the meantime, Gaston Sumulo journeyed to the neighboring Burundi and recruited thousands of troops with the support of the Burundian government. He begins plans for the invasion of the Congo from South Kivu. But whilst these plans for a rebellion were being developed, Pierre Mulele, another ardent supporter of Lumumba and Gizenga, recently returned from military training in China and started recruiting men to launch a revolution in his native province of Kwilu. Recruiting men from his native ethnic group, the Mbunda, as well as from Gizenga's Pende, he launched an armed revolt against the central government beginning in late 1963 called the Kwilu Rebellion. Mulele's uprising will give the CNL the much-needed boost, as shortly after, Sumalo's forces would enter South Kivu, overpower its defenses, and begin a much larger revolt called the Simba Rebellion. On January 16, 1964, conflict broke out in the cities of Idiofa and Gonku in the Kwilu province. What initially started as a small insurgency the previous year had now grown into a full-blown rebellion. Rebels led by Pierre Mulele carried out attacks on many religious, government, and industrial institutions throughout Kwilu. This resulted in the deaths of many Congolese. Things took a turn for the worse on the 5th of February when Mulele's men ambushed and killed a Congolese army chief. As a result, the Congolese government declared a state of emergency in the Kwilu province. Mulele's forces, despite being poorly armed, made extensive use of witchcraft to demoralize their opponents. They also adopted tactics reminiscent of the Chinese Revolution, following a strict moral code and emphasizing respect for civilians, an ideology they called Mulelism. As the fightings continued, several non-Congolese in the region began to flee the country. At the time, the United Nations operation in the Congo, ONUC, a peacekeeping mission tasked with maintaining law and order during the secessionist crisis, was in the process of withdrawing its troops from the Congo. However, they managed to mobilize a small contingent of peacekeepers to the Kwilu province with the specific objective of rescuing some Western missionaries. About 100 missionaries were successfully recovered through this operation. Apart from this mission, Onok played no further role in the rebellion. Following the initial success of the rebels, General Joseph Mobutu, the commander of the Congolese army, implemented a scorched earth policy against the Kwilu rebels. As a result, the Congolese army burned down many villages in Kwilu and brutally executed many civilians. In the nearby town of Kikwit, they executed more than 3,000 people. Leading this operation was one Colonel Joseph Muzimba, who callously dubbed the military camp under his command the National Butchery of the Kikwit. 16th April 1964. CNL rebels from the east, now referred to as the Simbas, a Swahili word for lion, entered South Kivu from Burundi through the plain of Ruzizi and made their way to the city of Bukavu. Armed with lists of targeted political figures, they killed a minimum of 8 civilians and 4 policemen. That same day, government forces attempted to regain control of the situation and managed to capture 13 Simbas, whom they promptly executed. On the 15th of May, Sumialot forces captured the city of Uriva. For 3 days, policemen, civil servants, and military personnel are subjected to a manhunt and killed on the spot. Rebel leader Colonel Louis Bidalira commanded the execution. The rebels then proceeded to capture the town of Bisi. Like their counterparts in Kwilu, the Simbas increasingly relied on magic to claim immunity to bullets and ensure their invisibility on the battlefield. Additionally, they incorporated a group of Rwanda exiles called the Inyenzes. Having made several unsuccessful attempts to reclaim their home country, the exiles joined the rebellion with the hope of receiving support for their endeavors in Rwanda from a Simba-led government. Lacking modern weapons, except for those acquired from the defeated or fleeing Congolese army, the Simbas recklessly charged into enemy lines, resulting in substantial casualties. However, this did not deter them from intimidating the government troops.
Vous vous considérez comme l'héritier et comme le vengeur de Patrice Lumumba. Comment est-ce que vous allez continuer sa politique?
Non, nous sommes les continuateurs de l'œuvre de Patrice Lumumba. Nous ne sommes pas des vengeurs. Parce que quand on fait la politique de vengeance, c'est une politique d'extermination. Nous ne sommes pas ici pour exterminer les ennemis de Patrice Lumumba. Mais nous sommes ici pour lutter contre le régime qui fait la honte de notre Congo.
On the 27th of May 1964, pro-Simba forces in the North Katanga city of Albertville, led by Laurent Desire Kabila, revolted against the provincial government of J.C. Sendwe. Sendwe, the former leader of the Balubakat party and president of the province of North Katanga, was accused of embezzling public funds and detained. However, on the 30th of May, government troops led by Colonel Louis Bobozo successfully regained control of the town, rescuing Sendwe and killing about 250 rebels in the process. Sendwe suspected Prosper Wambalunga, his longtime rival and former provincial president, of orchestrating the rebellion and had him arrested. Then, on the 19th of June, the population revolted once again and successfully ousted the government. Exploiting the ensuing chaos, the Simbas captured the town of Albertville. Government forces fled, abandoning Sendwe, who was subsequently murdered by the rebels under unclear circumstances. Meanwhile, Christophe Gbenye, the leader of the CNL, spearheads the revolt in the northeastern part of the Congo. He organized his troops under the name of the People's Liberation Army, the APL, and placed them under the command of General Nicolas Olenga. By June, Olenga's men had successfully occupied North Kivu and a significant portion of the southern Oriental province. On the 22nd of July, they advanced into the province of Maniema and seized a strategically significant capital of Kindu. That same month, troops commanded by Kabila captured the city of Bodouanville and set about conquering the entire western shores of Lake Tanganyika. Consequently, the Congolese army responded with brutal counter-insurgency measures but ultimately failed to defeat the rebels. Soon, these growing insurgents attracted support from the Soviet Union and China. The Soviets sent weapons and military equipment to the rebels via cargo planes coming from neighboring Sudan. Unfortunately, this operation swiftly turned against them as Sudan soon became embroiled in its own civil war. Amid the ongoing successes of the Simbas, General Joseph Mobutu pressured President Joseph Kasavubu to dismiss Prime Minister Cyril Adoula and install a new government led by Moise Tshombe. Tshombe, the exiled leader of the former state of Katanga and a staunch enemy of Patrice Lumumba, was seen as the ideal leader to confront the Simbas. He was brought back from exile and officially appointed the new Prime Minister on the 10th of July 1964. The new Prime Minister immediately sought military aid from Western nations, recruited white mercenaries, and brought back his loyalist troops, the Katangese Gendarmerie, from exile in Angola. Seeking a government of reconciliation, he secures the release of about 600 political prisoners, including former Deputy Prime Minister Antoine Gizenga. Nevertheless, Tshombe's rise to power generated significant discontent within the Congo and other African countries. Meanwhile, the Simbas continued their menacing advance, this time towards the heart of the Oriental province. On August the 4th, terror struck the educated elite in Stalinville as the city fell into the hands of the rebels under the command of General Nicolas Olenga. In the absence of their competent commander, Colonel Leonard Mulamba, the Congolese army in the city fled. The Simbas wasted no time and swiftly began the systematic execution of Congolese intellectuals. Anyone deemed to have adopted the Western way of life was murdered in front of a monument dedicated to Patrice Lumumba. The sheer brutality of the executions claimed the lives of several thousand Congolese. Rebel leader Alphonse Kingins, Olegans' second-in-command, led the executions. Unfortunately for the Simbas, Stalinville's capture would become a magnet for Western intervention. In the following weeks, more large-scale executions would be carried out in Paulis and Wasta after the Simbas occupied the cities on the 19th and 24th of August, respectively. Afterward, General Olenga led his troops to Bukavu and attempted to capture the city. But after facing heavy resistance from the Congolese forces under the command of Colonel Mulamba, they retreated. Subsequently, Mulamba's troops initiated a systematic purge of Bukavu and its surrounding areas, leading to numerous summary executions. Tragically, many of the victims were Rwanda Tutsis suspected of supporting the Simbas. After the capture of Stalinville, the Simbas established a state around the territories they occupied. They called it the People's Republic of the Congo. Led by Christophe Benye, the rebels now held control of over more than half of the entire Congo. However, despite their swift progress on the battlefield, the Simbas were unable to consolidate their gains and establish an alternative system of administration to replace the one they had effortlessly dismantled. In terms of military success, the Simbas outperformed their counterparts in Kwilu, But by prioritizing militarism over politics and preferring action over reflection, they had become much like the previous administrators they had sought to dismantle. Corruption and ethnic favoritism became liabilities for the rebel leaders, and soon, these burgeoning weaknesses would lead to their eventual collapse. With a significant portion of northern Congo under their control, the Simbas began advancing deeper into the province of Kasai. The control of Kasai up to the Angolan border would effectively split the government forces in half and isolate the province of Katanga. In August, the Simbas began the conquest of Kasai. As in previous encounters, the Congolese forces continued to retreat, with some defecting to join the rebels. Nevertheless, Moise Tshombe, the recently appointed Prime Minister, responds decisively to this new threat. He orders troops from the Katangese gendarmerie and a group of mercenaries to engage the rebels near Lulaborg. Facing relentless bombardment from the federal troops, the Simbas suffered heavy casualties, prompting their retreat from Kasai. The sources in Kasai validates Tshombe's decision to employ Western mercenaries in enhancing the capabilities of his well-trained Katangese formations. Arguably, the most crucial figure among the mercenaries was a former British military officer by the name of Major Mike Orr, who had previously assisted Tshombe during the Katangese Rebellion, was the leader of a mercenary unit called the 5 Commando, comprising about 300 men, many of whom were opportunistic white South Africans. Orr's 5 Commando would ultimately play a pivotal role in suppressing the rebellion. Following the triumph in Kasai, Tshombe ordered a combined offensive against the city of Albertville. Retaking the city would grant the Congolese army access to Lake Tanganyika and establish a strategic base for future offensives. On August 24th, Major Mike Orr and his mercenaries led an assault on Albertville, codenamed Operation Wash Shane. They attacked the city with 30 men, followed by a coordinated assault by the Congolese army. However, by August 28th, Orr's involvement in the operation ended in a disaster when his forces failed to reach their targets. Fortunately, the Congolese army took the city on the 30th of August and saved the lives of 135 Europeans. Together with the victory in Kasai, the recapture of Albertville provided stability to the government's southern flank. After the capture of Stalinville by the Simbas, Belgian and American support for the Congolese government grew. Consequently, the Belgian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Paul Henri Spaak, appoints Colonel Frederik van der Wel as Tshombe's military advisor. Tshombe was particularly delighted with van der Wel's arrival, as they had previously worked together during the Katangese Rebellion. Tasked with organizing the Congolese army against the Simbas, van der Wel begins plans to recapture the rebel-held territory by attacking it from all sides. He created the 5th Mechanized Brigade, composed of 66 Belgian officers, 350 mercenaries, several thousand Congolese gendarmes, and troops from the Congolese army. Set up into 5 mobile columns, he names it after a Belgian procession, Ommegang. The new military advisor lays his plans as follows. The first column, Lima 1, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Albert Liégeois, would begin the assault on Stalinville by driving north against the scattered resistance from Congolo through Kimbombo, seizing the town of Kindu in the process. After which, they will be reinforced by troops from the second column, Lima 2, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Lamoigny. Together, they will make their way towards Stalinville from Mobutu. Before that, the northern column will begin their assault from Gemena to the rebel-held territories of Lisala and Bomba, before finally reaching the town of Paulis. Similarly, the Shuapa column was tasked with recapturing the towns of Boinde and Ikela, and the last column from Bukavu was tasked with advancing northwards towards Bunia. By the end of September, the northern column reached Lisala and recaptured the city of Bomba on October the 16th. Also, the Shuapa column retook the town of Boinde on October the 24th. In Stalinville, internal tensions began to arise amongst the Simbas. As the Congolese army continued its relentless advance, rebel leader Christophe Benye ordered the arrest of all foreigners residing within Simba-held territory. General Nicolas Olenga further corroborated this on October the 31st.
The Americans and Belgians must be kept in safe places. In case of bombing in the area, exterminate them without giving any explanation. Signed, General Olenga.
Known to be out of the city in the middle of the month, Benye returned to Stalinville on October the 24th with a captured American missionary by the name of Dr. Paul Carlson. Accused of working with the CIA, Carlson became a symbol of hatred for the rebels. By the end of the month, the Simbas had arrested more than 1,000 European and US citizens, with a significant number held in Stalinville's Hotel Victoria. With the highest number of captives being Belgians and Americans, Paul-Henri Spaak, the Belgian Minister of Foreign Affairs, travels to New York City in early November to meet with UN and American authorities. The Americans made no secret of their willingness to act. In utmost secrecy, a Belgian and American operation is decided. It will be an airborne operation under the codename Dragon Rouge. The Americans will provide the planes, a squadron of C-130s led by Colonel Brugas Gardwell of the United States Air Force, while the Belgians will provide the para-commandos led by Colonel Charles Laurent. The operation would see the United States employ 12 C-130 aircraft to transport a Belgian paratroop battalion of about 545 men from the Kleine Brogo Air Base in Belgium through Spain, the Ascension Island, Katanga's Camina Air Base, and finally to the Stalinville Airport. Furthermore, the airborne assault will also coincide with the arrival of Van der Waals Ommegang Grand Forces, composed of mercenary troops and a contingent of the Congolese army. After a month of frustrating delays, Ommegang Selema I began its advance from Congolo on November the 1st, seizing the town of Kindu on November the 5th. As Liégeois men pushed the rebels back, they began to kill their hostages. As a result, the commander imposes on his column a sustained rhythm, progressing even at night. In so doing, he disrupts several ambushes and saves more than 300 hostages. For the next 2 weeks, an airlift brings to Kindu reinforcements, vehicles, and ammunition. Lieutenant Colonel Lamoines Lematu had just arrived. Together, they resumed their advance towards Stalinville on November the 19th. After several battles with the rebels and the terrain, they reached the town of Lumumbist, some 200 kilometers from Stalinville, on November the 22nd. At about 5:30 p.m. the next day, the Ommegang troops left Lumumbist for Stalinville. On November the 17th, 12 American C-130 aircraft took off from Belgium's Kleine Brogo Air Base, passed through Spain, and landed on the British Overseas Territory in the middle of the Atlantic called the Ascension Island. On board, troops from the Belgian 1st Paratroopers Battalion. At Ascension, they prepared to carry out one of the largest rescue operations in history. Transferred to the Congolese air base in Kamina on November the 22nd, news comes in the next day, green light from the Belgian authorities and the Congolese government. Tomorrow at dawn, they will jump on the Simisini air base in Stalinville and rescue the European hostages. On the morning of November the 24th, 5 American C-130 planes dropped 320 Belgian paratroopers onto the airfield in Stalinville. Additionally, a platoon of paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division was tasked with safeguarding the aircraft while on ground. With air support from Cuban expatriate mercenaries, the paratroopers descended on the Simisini air base and prepared themselves to secure it before additional aircrafts could land with more men and supplies. Soon, they were greeted with trace fire from Chinese 12.7mm anti-aircraft machine guns from the Simbas. At about 6 a.m., the hostages in the Stalinville's Hotel Victoria were awakened by sounds of planes flying over the city. Speculation immediately arose about a Belgian paratroop drop. As a result, the guards at the hotel knocked on all doors and ordered all men, women and children down into the street. However, around 50 hostages managed to hide on the upper floors of the building. Half an hour later, Colonel Joseph Opepe, the rebel leader stationed at the hotel, leads about 250 hostages to the Simisini airport. After a short march, a truck of Simbas arrived from the airport, proclaiming that the Belgian paratroopers had landed and seized control of the airport. As a result, Colonel Opepe instructs the hostages to sit on the street. For about 2 to 3 minutes, considerable confusion ensued amongst the Simbas. By now, they could hear the sound of heavy gunfire from the approaching paratroopers. Suddenly, the bloodthirsty rebels unleashed as much carnage as possible by firing their automatic weapons at the seated hostages. The ordeal lasted for about 5 minutes. Subsequently, a platoon of paratroopers led by Lieutenant Mertens arrived at the scene. They ran into a pickup truck full of Simbas and immediately opened fire, killing several rebels and wounding others. Mertens then secured the location before moving his platoon to the Hotel Victoria. He deploys 2 sections to cover his movement and took another inside to search the hotel. They found the 50 hostages who had remained hidden and brought them out. Once assembled, Mertens sends them to the battalion command post before continuing his mission. Then, at about 11 a.m., the Ommegang troops arrived at Stalinville and established communications with the Belgian paratroopers. Lieutenant Colonel Leopold Lima penetrated the city and controlled the Shopo Bridge. Similarly, Lieutenant Colonel Lamoignis Lematu occupied the 2 main rebel camps in the city.
Survivors are gathered up for evacuation. Not all are white. Sima fury is directed also against Congolese loyal to the government. Refugees gather at the airport waiting to be airlifted to Leopoldville. Every hour brings word of new atrocities beyond the slaughter of the first 29 found in downtown Stanleyville. Paratroops pressing on to other cities find similar grim evidence. Reports of the number of dead or wounded leap almost every...
Out of the 250 hostages ordered on the streets, 18 tragically lost their lives while 40 sustained severe injuries. Amongst those killed during the raid was the American missionary Dr. Paul Carson, who was gunned down while attempting to take cover over a nearby wall.
Mon frère a été tué à côté de moi.
Et vos enfants?
L'aîné a eu une éraflure de balle juste sur le cuir chevelu, mais très superficielle.
Oh, nous n'avions pas de chez nous, notre chez nous c'était au Congo. On verra, on se débrouillera.
In the end, more than 1,800 non-Congolese, along with about 400 Congolese individuals, were successfully evacuated. Operation Dragon Rouge was finally over. Despite the success of the raid, the Congolese Prime Minister Moise Tshombe faced heavy criticism from the international community for involving Belgian and US troops. They saw it as another act of imperialism. Nevertheless, Stalinville's fall dealt a significant blow to the Eastern insurrection, from which the Simbas never fully recovered. Subsequently, General Joseph Mobutu, the Congolese army chief, arrived and ordered the cleansing of the city. His forces executed many Simbas and destroyed the Lumumba monument. In December, Mobutu's men captured and killed the rebel leader Alphonse Kingins and dumped his body on the ruins of the Lumumba monument, the same place where he had ordered the execution of Congolese intellectuals back in August. Two days after Operation Dragon Rouge, the Belgians and the Americans launched another assault on the Polish airstrip 280 kilometers northeast of Stalinville. Codenamed Operation Dragon Noir, the paratroopers managed to rescue about 375 European hostages, but tragically lost around 20 to the Simbas. Coming under international pressure, Operation Dragon Noir would mark the end of direct American and Belgian intervention in the rebellion. In a tragic turn of events, the Simba forces who had fled from Polis arrived at Watsa and brutally murdered several European hostages there. This included 9 nuns and 6 missionaries. Despite the dispersal of the main rebel forces, Eastern Congo remained largely under Simba control, with numerous hostages still held captive. As a result, General Mobutu assigns Major Mike Orr's 5 Commando to recapture and secure the border areas with Uganda and Sudan. In January 1965, Major Mike Orr and his men launched Operation White Giant, which saw the recapture of the cities of Aru, Aba, Faraje, and Watsa. Though the Simbas demonstrated their capability as a formidable fighting force by inflicting significant defeats on the Congolese army near Bafwasende and Bomba, the rebels had become too weak to resume their offensive and were unable to exploit their defensive successes. However, help would come for the rebels in April 1965 in the person of Ernesto Che Guevara. The Argentine-born Cuban revolutionary arrived in the Congo with mostly black Cuban volunteers aiming to bring about a Cuban-style revolution and overthrow the Congolese government. Initially collaborating with guerrilla leader Laurent Desire Kabila, Guevara found the rebels to be seemingly undisciplined. Nevertheless, he continued to train them, leading to improved performance and well-organized ambushes against the Congolese army. Unfortunately, whilst Guevara tried to conceal his presence, the CIA knew his location, monitored his communications, and anticipated his attacks. After 7 months of defeats, inactivity, and a declining health, he reluctantly left the Congo with his Cuban comrades on the 20th of November 1965.
We cannot liberate, all by ourselves, a country that does not want to fight.
Subsequently, the Congolese army and its mercenaries launched a multi-pronged campaign against the Simba strongholds of Fiji and Baraka, recapturing the cities and resulting in the deaths of over 215 rebels. The final Simba stronghold near Bukavu resisted for a month, but it was eventually captured after the Simbas had killed several thousand civilians. By the end of the rebellion, the Simbas had executed over 20,000 Congolese and 392 Westerners. After their defeat, Kabila and Sumialo continued to support the remaining insurgents from their exile in Tanzania, while Benye and Olenga became businessmen in Sudan and Uganda. The Kwilu Rebellion, on the other hand, persisted until December 1965. However, the rebels could not expand beyond their initial base, and hunger and disease had spread throughout the province, leading to a decline in the support for the rebellion. In the end, it claimed the lives of over 60,000 civilians. Subsequently, rebel leader Pierre Mulele would go into exile in Congo-Brazzaville. The end of the Simba Rebellion saw the beginning of a new political conflict in the Congo. In March 1965, the Congo held its national elections, and Moise Tshombe's Convention Nationale Congolais (CONACO) secured a large majority of seats. Tensions escalated as a significant part of Tshombe's party defected to form the new Front Democratique Congolais (FDC). Resultingly, CONACO gained control of the Chamber of Deputies, while the FDC took charge of the Senate. Attempting to exploit the situation, Congolese President Joseph Kasavubu deposed Tshombe and appointed Evariste Kimba of the FDC as Prime Minister. Kimba, who had previously served as Tshombe's Minister of Foreign Affairs during the Katanga Rebellion, faced resistance as the pro-Tshombe parliament refused to ratify his appointment. Instead of seeking a compromise candidate, Kasavubu once again overruled the parliament and unilaterally declared Kimba as Prime Minister. However, the parliament rejected Kimba for a second time. This political deadlock created the perfect opportunity for the army chief, General Joseph Mobutu, to seize power in the bloodless coup on November 25, 1965. Consequently, Mobutu appointed the competent Colonel Leonard Mulamba as Prime Minister, but later deposed him after abolishing the post the following year. He then reduced the number of provinces and their autonomy, resulting in a highly centralized state. Subsequently, Tshombe fled the country a second time and found refuge in Spain after being charged with treason. In the end, Mobutu gradually consolidated its control in the Congo, establishing himself as the embodiment of political power. As the years went on, he strengthened his hold on power by suppressing the opposition and maintaining an iron grip on the country for the next 3 decades.